thank you to the India Foundation, and it's good to be back with many of you, familiar faces. I'd like to say right from the outset, I'm listed as coming from the UK, but I'm really from the US. And I only have a short time to tell you what we're working on at the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism. But for the past 20 years, I'm a psychologist. I've been interviewing terrorists, about 600 of them, and looking at their trajectories into and back out of terrorism. What makes a terrorist? And thank you so much to our previous speakers, Mr. Dorsey particularly, and our Palestinian colleague, who got to some of the roots of terrorism and pointed out that soft power counter-narratives won't be very effective unless we see the whole picture. And it's very important to see the whole picture and to deal with all of it, the root causes, the elements of good and bad governance. But anyway, as far as my research, I've interviewed terrorists all around the world, and from interviewing about 600 of them, come to the conclusion that there's 4 things that make a terrorist. And I would say those 4 things are a group. Almost always there's a group operating. Secondly, there's social support. Thirdly, there's an ideology. And fourth, there's something inside the individual that resonates to the first 3. And you can fight terrorism in many ways. In our particular group, we've decided to look at counter-narratives, and in the last year, we went and interviewed ISIS cadres. We've interviewed them around the world. Some of them were defectors, some of them were returnees from the battleground. As you know, there were 40,000 foreign fighters from over 100 countries that joined Islamic State. And some of them were in prisons in Baghdad, in Suleimania. And at this point, we've interviewed 77 of them. It might be 78, I lose track. And what we do is we sit down, we make a very in-depth interview. We ask them who they were before they joined the terrorist group, what attracted them to the group, how they heard about it. And as one of our previous speakers, I think it was Mr. Dorsey, told us, Islamic State is selling a dream. So they're selling an alternative form of world governance, an answer to alienation, marginalization, injustice, indignity. And so how did they get attracted into this dream? What did they believe about it? How did they join? How did they find the contact to get in? How did they travel, if they traveled? Once they got there, did they go through Sharia training? A lot of them that joined in Syria after Islamic State declared its caliphate told us that when they finished Sharia training, they were brought a prisoner because they were trained near the Tabqa Dam where the prisoners were held. And as their initiation, they had to behead a prisoner. The ones in Iraq that joined didn't have that experience after Sharia training, although some of them received a phone call and said, "Today you will behead." And ISIS is a hear and obey organization, so you don't argue. Otherwise, you're the one that gets beheaded. We also talked to them about their weapons training, about what position they took. If they were a woman, were they invited into the Hizbah? That was the morality police. What were their experiences in the Hizbah? One woman told us about biting with metal teeth, punishing other women by biting them on fleshy parts of their bodies until some women bled to death from this. If they were children, if they were in the cubs of the caliphate, whatever their particular experiences were. Then we moved to what did they not like about Islamic State? What were they disappointed in? And nearly all of them were disappointed. We asked them about these experiences, and if they defected, how did they defect? How did they get out? Why did they leave? And they had to risk their lives to defect. A guy that got caught for defecting would be beheaded. A woman that got caught for defecting, the guys that were with her would be beheaded, and she'd be sent back to Raqqa and remarried to someone else forcibly. So why would they take that risk? How did they do it? How do they feel now? If they're in prison, how do they feel about Islamic State? Did it work out very well for them? Do they have advice to others? Some of the people that we've been interviewing in Baghdad recently tell us, well, there's no advice about joining Islamic State. Islamic State is defeated. And our answer is, well, there's still people joining. We recently had attacks in New York from 2 people that were reading on the internet thinking that perhaps they're helping the people in Iraq. What's their advice to these people? Is it helping? Should they join? What's the advice to a young kid in Molenbeek? Should he join? What's the advice to the people in their own country? Should they join? And at this point, many people give very strong denunciations of the group. And I should say we're video recording all of this. Then we also ask, in Baghdad, most of the ISIS cadres, unless they were kids when they went in, receive a death sentence. So they're facing that they're going to be hung. And we ask them, because they at least for a while, most of them were true believers, we ask them, how's it going to be when you face Allah? How do you feel about that? What's going to happen? And at that moment, we get some very true words about how they're afraid, how they beg Allah for forgiveness. We talked to a rapist, a guy that raped 50 women. At first, he sounded proud of it. He talked about how he went to a home where they were keeping these Yazidi women and routinely raped them. We asked him in detail about it. And he said, I had to hit them to subdue them. One woman he didn't have to fight with, and he thought she liked him while he was raping her. Can you imagine? It was a very pathetic story and a pathetic man. But at the end, when we asked this question, he suddenly expressed deep remorse and opened up about it. We interviewed an ISIS emir that showed no remorse whatsoever, was very proud and sure of the ideology. And in the interview, we showed him one of our counter-narratives, because it was so chilling listening to him. I suddenly said, can I show you somebody who disagrees with you that I've got on video? And he watched it intently and suddenly hung his head in shame and said, you know what? We had debates about this inside the organization. We were wrong. Of course, this didn't, change him and rehabilitate him, that we can let him go, but it also showed the power of what we're doing. So I can talk about this, and I'll just tell you a few things, but then I want to show you a counter-narrative because I know my time is short. And you can go on YouTube, you can look at all of them. So far, out of the 78 interviews, we've managed to make 18 counter-narrative videos. We've just received funding, and we're going into our next phase where we hope to put it on steroids and have hundreds of counter-narrative videos. We distribute them all over the world. They're being used on 4 continents. They're being used in madrasas, schools, by police, by prison rehab individuals. They're being put on TV, on the internet. We ourselves have distributed them on Facebook. We did a study where we were able to identify ISIS supporters in English and in Albanian on Facebook. We found them by hashtags, and then we tagged them with our counter-narrative video. And I should mention that when we put one of our counter-narrative videos up on YouTube, you can find our YouTube channel. It's ICSVE on YouTube. That's the initials of our center. And when we tag them with our counter-narrative videos, the name looks like an ISIS video. The thumbnail looks like an ISIS video, because when we take these interviews, a 2-hour interview, we cut it down to about 2 to 4 minutes. And we have a speaker speaking, and we blur their face. That could be boring, so you have to illustrate what he speaks about. And what we decided is to go to ISIS's own propaganda and take from their video to illustrate what he's speaking about, but to switch it on them, to show a frame of disgust, a frame of horror with what they're doing as the speaker talks. So when we tagged ISIS supporters on Facebook with these videos, they thought they were ISIS videos. And that's the whole idea, to reach the people that are already consuming ISIS materials and hopefully entice them into consuming our videos. So we don't name it expert counter-narrative video. We name it, well, the one I'm going to show you is called The Rewards of Joining the Islamic State. It's a questionable title, right? You don't know. what kind of rewards. But maybe the best thing is to show you. And I should just say, on Facebook, when we tagged ISIS supporters, ISIS distributors, we were amazed that they redistributed our films. They allowed them into channels. We've also dropped them into Telegram channels. They allowed them into closed channels where it was an ISIS reverberating chamber, echo chamber. And because they thought that they were their own videos, they allowed them in. Of course, we got cursed later. And it's dangerous work, but we've decided that it's important work. And it's not the whole story. It's a tool in the toolbox, and I totally agree with the speakers before me who said good governance is the real answer. But this is one tool, so I'll show it to you. Everything we do is free. It's for you to use. You can go to YouTube. If you want it in your language, just let us know. We'll do our best to get it for you subtitled in your language. Right now, our videos are subtitled in about 20 languages.